Welcome to Cartoon Scary! Boo!
At the edge of an isolated village, surrounded by dense, thorny overgrowth, sits a dry, abandoned brick well. This site serves as the physical anchor for the Andhakup Siddhi, an ancient and highly dangerous ritual hidden in plain sight. While typical folklore might feature benevolent spirits or magical wish-granters, the entity residing at the bottom of this well operates on a system of cold transaction. It does not grant boons out of kindness, it strictly executes trades. To understand how this works, look at this conceptual contract. You don't simply ask for a favor, you submit a proposal. A human must descend into the well for 5 consecutive nights, sitting in total darkness to recite a specific invocation. This process forces the entity to open a window for negotiation. Once the entity acknowledges the negotiator on the 5th night, the humans state their terms. These almost always center on 3 things: massive wealth, social power, and a life free of effort. The entity listens, and if the ritual is performed correctly, it approves the transaction. But engaging with this entity means entering a binding legal agreement with a supernatural predator. The entity grants the human's demands immediately, while the true cost of the deal remains hidden behind the fine print. Mithun spent his life looking for this specific kind of shortcut. While his friend Rajan spent his nights studying to build a career, Mithun spent his time searching for any loophole that would allow him to bypass hard work. This obsession led him to a cheap local newspaper, where he found a fragmented guide to the Andhakup Siddhi. It listed the steps for the 5-night ritual and promised riches, though it was missing the full text of the ancient warnings. Rajan warned him that occult shortcuts usually carry a hidden price, but Mithun ignored him. He cleared the brush from the dry well and spent the next 4 nights descending into the darkness, treating a dangerous ritual like a simple financial hack. On the 5th night, he sat in the dark without a torch. As he finished the final chant, the ground beneath him turned freezing cold. A heavy voice echoed from the dirt, demanding his terms. Mithun asked for wealth, power, and an easy life. The well went silent, and Mithun climbed out, convinced he had won. He didn't realize that signing a supernatural contract with fragmented information is exactly how the trap is set. The payout began immediately. Within a week, Mithun was winning every gamble and hitting consecutive lotteries. He began closing real estate deals that usually took months, suddenly acting as the middleman for the village's most expensive properties. Within months, his old house with its leaking roof was gone. In its place stood a towering mansion with marble floors and a full staff of servants who anticipated his every move. He invited Rajan over to display his new lifestyle, boasting that the ritual had worked exactly as promised. But as Rajan walked through the opulent house, he felt a deep, instinctive sense of unease. He knew that this level of reward was impossible without an equal sacrifice. Mithun, however, stopped questioning how the money arrived once it became consistent. He was too focused on his new status to worry about the mechanics of the entity he had. The constant influx of cash made the risks feel non-existent. Mithun lived as though the money were a gift, completely ignoring the fact that the ledger still had to be balanced. Then the fortune reversed. Real estate deals collapsed on the day of signing, and the gambling wins vanished. Within weeks, former business partners turned into enemies, and the cash that had arrived so easily began flowing rapidly backward to cover massive losses. The financial collapse was joined by physical terror. Mithun started waking up in the middle of the night, gasping for air as if invisible hands were tightening around his throat. He felt a constant sensation of being buried alive, even in his own bed. The newspaper article Mithun read had omitted one critical detail. This contract requires a recurring installment plan. To keep the wealth flowing, a fresh blood sacrifice is due every new moon. Mithun hadn't made a single offering. His missed payments compounded on the supernatural ledger, stacking into a massive, critical balance he couldn't pay. In a dark bargain, not knowing the rules doesn't stop the penalty. It only ensures that when the entity decides to collect, the interest will be higher than the borrower can afford. A terrified, broken Mithun eventually returned to Rajan for help. His arrogance was gone, replaced by the panic of a man who realized he was being hunted by his own creditor. Rajan brought in Baba Gorakhnath, an expert in the occult. The moment the Baba reached the dry well, he could smell the rot and the heavy energy of a neglected debt hanging over the site. The Baba realized the severity of the situation. Mithun had awakened a starved entity and left it entirely unfed for months while he spent its money. The only chance to survive was to pay the arrears immediately. On the upcoming new moon, Mithun would have to descend into the well one last time to offer a belated sacrifice, a black rooster, and hope the entity would accept it as a late settlement. But when the debt is this large, the borrower has no power left. Mithun could only go into the well and pray that the entity preferred a late payment over total foreclosure. On the night of the new moon, Mithun climbed back down the rope. His hands shook holding the black rooster and a flickering torch, trying to repeat the ritual he had started months ago. He cut the rooster, but the blood didn't even touch the soil. It dried up instantly in the air. A jagged voice echoed through the stone walls, declaring that after months of starvation, a simple bird would no longer satisfy the contract. The earth at the bottom of the well cracked open. Black, skeletal hands burst from the ground and grabbed Mithun, pulling him down into the dirt before he could climb for the rope. The entity was settling the debt in full. Watching from above, Baba Gorakhnath knew it was over. When a contract with the darkness is broken, the entity eventually stops asking for offerings and takes its payment directly from the debtor. Mithun took the shortcut and arrived exactly where the darkness intended. In the Andhakup Siddhi, the ledger always balances, and the price is always paid in flesh.